Well, howdy folks, welcome back to another Out of Spec Renew video. Today we've got this Model 3 standard range here in the shop, and we're going to be swapping the battery on this thing. Alright, so like I mentioned there in the intro, this is a 2019 Standard Range Plus Model 3, and we've got some major battery issues going on here. This car's got about 144,000 miles on it. And yeah, there you go, 143,970. And if we go over here to service alerts, you can see we've got several different alerts on the BMS. So we've got a brick over discharge, brick voltage imbalance, SOC imbalance. Basically what we've encountered here with this pack is it's had a weak short within one of the bricks, which has over discharged one of the bricks in particular. And then now it's basically bricked. So car's sitting at 0%. And this battery, probably not viable to be recoverable. So we're going to be swapping this pack out. And the customer actually sourced the pack for this one. But upon sort of my recommendation, we went ahead and they sourced a lithium iron phosphate 60 kilowatt hour pack. So it'll be a bit of an upgrade in terms of usable capacity. And of course, it'll be an upgrade as far as just being lithium iron phosphate in general. So they'll be able to fully charge it every day and kind of have more daily usable range. Should have better longevity. And so yeah, that's going to be the plan here. So we're going to be swapping a lithium iron phosphate pack into this standard range Model 3. Let's see, if we go back to service here, I can show you guys a little bit more on the battery. So I don't know if it'll give us actual cell voltages here, but if we click on this, yeah, we've got BMS fault, battery requires replacement, etc., etc. And then we've got that imbalance in the alert log, and then we've also got this brick under voltage. So basically the brick that had the weak short has become over discharged from just a slow self discharge within that brick caused by said weak short. If we look at this, we've got brick SOC max, brick SOC min, which is saying 13.5 for SOC min, but I don't know that I really buy that, because if we go back to the alerts, I think on over discharged here, it showed, yeah, brick voltage on the lowest voltage one, 0.079 volts. So yeah, severely over discharged, well beyond what would be considered recoverable. Even if we could track down the source of a weak short issue there, it's too over discharged to be able to do anything about anyways. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get prepped to start doing the swap on this thing, and hopefully we should have this car back up and running by the end of the day. Alright, so one of the first things we need to do here in order to get this car up on the lift is we actually need to take this rocker trim off. So normally when you lift a Model 3, you lift from these lift points right here, which are actually part of the battery. So when you lift one of these cars normally, you're actually lifting it up on the bottom of the battery. Obviously, if we're dropping the battery out of the car, we can't lift it from the battery, because then we wouldn't be able to drop it. So there's actually a set of secondary lift points that are on the rocker panel here. We have to remove this rocker trim to get to them. The other side is actually already missing its rocker trim, so I'll show you what it looks like over here. If we scoot that out of the way, so that's with the rocker trim removed, and there's actually supposed to be a little piece of foil tape over this hole, but this hole right there is where the lift point is, and we've got these special pucks. They're actually magnetic, and it'll just stick right to the rocker there, and that'll be our lift point to pick the car up from. So we've got one here, we've got one up at the front corner. I'll go ahead and remove the rocker trim from the other side, and we'll do it over there. Removing the rocker trim's pretty simple. It's just got a couple of clips at each end that attach to the fender liner, and then in the middle area it's got several of these little rectangular flaps that pop down. Well, maybe if we grab a tool, we should be able to open one of those up, if I can find one. There's one. There you go. So that little flap opens up, and then there's just a bolt in there with a 10mm head, just a regular M6 bolt. There should be, I believe, 4 on each side. Some of the newer cars, they actually eliminate the ones in the middle, and they just have the 2 at each end. But yeah, I'll go ahead and remove this rocker trim. I'll get all the lift points lined up, and then we'll pick this car up. So the car is officially up on the lift on those jack pads. Now, the next thing that I want to do is we actually want to go to our thermal system, and we want to start our fill drain procedure. Basically what this does is it just opens all of the coolant valves, stops the pumps, all that good stuff. We have to confirm user presence by unlocking the gateway here. Okay, we're good. So now we can run that routine, and now we're ready to drain coolant on this thing. So that pretty much does that. And I think at this point we're ready to shut the car off. Normally one of the other things that I would do for a pack swap, if it were a pack that was going to get shipped anywhere, is I would do a HV discharge to bring it down to a percentage that would be reasonable for shipping, but we cannot discharge it because we already have an over discharged brick. That said, the pack is already at a fairly low state of charge. It's at 55%. Normally you'd want to be under 45% is Tesla's official recommendation for ground shipping. Really anything under 60% I would consider to be acceptable. This is, you know, quasi fine, maybe doesn't quite meet the spec, but we're good enough. If we really, really wanted to, we could manually discharge the bricks once the pack is out of the car, but we can't do the HV discharge routine with this in the car due to that over discharge brick. It won't close the contactors in order to run that discharge procedure. So I think that's about all that we need to do with the car on here. You can see our HV battery replacement routine is right here. We don't have to do anything with this beforehand. There's no procedures that we have to do pre-pack swap. It's all after we swap the pack. So yeah, that should do it. Let's go ahead and get this thing closed up, and then we'll prepare to disconnect the high voltage system and drain the coolant, and then we can get started on actually swapping this thing out. I guess another important thing that I should mention is before we power down the car, we actually want to leave it powered on so that A, we can open all the doors, and B, so that we can access all of the bolts that go through the floor into the top of the battery. Now, depending on the build date of the car, sometimes they have fasteners, well, they always have fasteners back here, so it'd be 1 on each side over here. There's also 2 on each side in the footwells, so 2 here, 2 on the passenger side. But sometimes on some builds of cars, they also have a fastener underneath the driver's and the passenger's seat, both on the front and the rear. So we want to be able to move the seats forward and backwards so that we can access all of those fasteners and make sure we get them all out. So we want to leave the car powered up for that. We'll get all those fasteners out. Then we'll go ahead and power down the car and start draining coolant and all that good stuff. All right, so I've got everything kind of deconstructed here to show you where all the fasteners would be. So we've got 1 fastener there for each side. Now, on some earlier cars, like I said, some of them have additional fasteners. This one does not have it, but you can see where the hole in the floor is that it would be. So just under this carpet flap, right behind the seat there. In the front seat area, we've got to take apart quite a bit of stuff and peel the carpet back. So we just kind of peel it back like so. And actually, if I scoot the seat back here, I'll be able to show you guys everything that we're looking for here. So we've got those 2 fasteners right down there that we need to take out. And the final one, if this car was equipped with it, which it's not, would be right back here. So you see this rib in the floor that ends right there? That final fastener would be just at the end of that rib right here. So you can see how these ribs all continue the full length. Well, you can't see them super well with this duct in the way, but that one right there would be where the extra fastener would be on some of the older models. But that's all that we've got here. Just those two. And this one here, that's under the carpet. Same on the other side, we'll have the same two, or same three rather. And then that's it for interior fasteners. Everything else is accessed from underneath. All right, as you can see, we've got the car up in the air here. Big empty space where front drive unit would go if this were a dual motor model. We've got all of our fasteners here along the sides that we're gonna have to remove. That'll be basically the last step to get this out of the car. First, we've got to go ahead and get access to all of our coolant lines. As you can see, I've already removed, of course, the lower skid plate, splash shield, whatever you want to call it. In order to really gain proper access to all the coolant lines here, we're going to have to remove these sort of little metal skid plates on the front edge. So we've got one here on the front, and then we've also got this protector plate on the back that also comes off. And then we can start disconnecting all of our coolant hard lines. Well, I say hard lines, they're plastic. They're kind of like a hard line. They're a pre-formed plastic line with quick connect fittings. And then we also need to get these fender wells. Oh, look, a rock. We need to get these fender wells out of the way. And basically what I'll do is I'll just strap that over to the suspension over here so it's out of our way. That right there is actually a super susceptible point on these to be damaged by road debris that gets sucked up by the wheel and shoved into the wheel well, and it can actually damage those coolant fittings on these. So something to keep in mind. There's actually aftermarket aluminum reinforcement pieces that you can put in here to try and protect that, as well as full aluminum skid plates. I would say the most important is actually this area here. That's the most susceptible to issues, but sometimes these can be damaged too if something comes up through the fabric. I mean, these bottom skid plates are just like a pressed fabric material, so there's not really any structure to those. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and pull all this stuff off. It's all just E-Torx fasteners for everything. And then start draining coolant. All right, I've pretty much disconnected all the different coolant lines and drained out as much coolant as we possibly can. Now we're ready to start actually unplugging some of our electrical connections. These are our two connections here at the front. Obviously, this is a rear-wheel drive car, so we don't have a motor in the way, which actually makes it a little bit easier to get these undone. These red tabs both have to pop out, which are kind of tough to get on these particular connectors for whatever reason. All right, I finally got both of those unplugged. This one actually came off a bit easier. This one, for whatever reason, the tab in there was getting hung up, so I actually just stuck a tool in right under the edge there where that tab locks on. I was able to just pry it up enough that it came loose. Go ahead and put that back on its little bracket where it's supposed to live there. And then this whole thing kind of just has a couple little studs that it presses onto down here on this plastic piece, like so. And I've disconnected this coolant line so we can get that around. And now that part of the harness is out of the way. And then that harness actually runs through this center spine here. And if this were a dual motor car, it would also have the two big cables for the motor. Obviously this one, rear-wheel drive car, so we don't have those two additional cables. Around at the back here, we've got a couple more connectors to undo. So we've got this one right here, which also went to this. This is where those two front connectors go to, and they're just combined into one connector on this end. So we've just got a little locking lever on there. That pops off like so. This cable is for the rear motor. Same deal, just a little locking lever. Comes off nice and easy. We do have a nut right here that attaches this bracket. onto the battery. So now that's loose. And what I could do is I could try and bend this cable down out of the way to clear the battery. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to disconnect the cable from the motor as well, which is just right up this way. There we go. So we'll disconnect the cable from the motor as well, and then we'll just fish this whole cable assembly out of here. This also has a fastener, except I can't fit that tool in there, so we'll just do that by actually, I got this tool. Bingo. All right, and then the cable that attaches to the motor is almost the same connector that attaches to the battery. Actually, it might even be the same connector. In any case, it disconnects the same way. Just red tab on the other bit, and then we can just twist this around to get it fed through somehow. There we go. So we got that cable out of the way now. I'll just set that off to the side. And I think at this point, we're just about ready to start dropping the battery. We've got everything disconnected. Our coolant lines are all undone. We've drained basically all of the coolant. I'm just gonna loosely put that right there so it's not hanging down out of our way. And yeah, let's go ahead and get the table under this thing. And well, I guess I have a couple more fasteners that I want to take out on the front and the back before we lower this down on the table. But that's basically it. So on each rear corner of the battery here, we've got these shear plates that attach to the rear subframe. So we're going to go ahead and take these off. I'm going to start by just removing the two bolts that go through the battery there. And then we've got this one big bolt that actually attaches the subframe in. We want to do this one corner at a time because we're actually removing one of the 4 bolts that holds the subframe in. So it is going to drop a bit. But we got that bolt out. We've got the shear plate back, and then I'm actually going to put this bolt back in just to support the subframe while we're working on it. Of course, we'll do the same thing again when we go to put this back together. So here at the front of the pack, we've got these sort of cast brackets here that attach at the front portion. We've got 4 bolts in each. We're going to go ahead and take all those out. Alrighty, there's that one. I'll do the other side, and then we're ready to drop this thing on the table and take the bolts out of the sides. All right, I lied. There is one more thing we need to do here underneath, and that's that we need to remove the center spine with the cables that run front to back. In theory, if our replacement pack came with another one of these, we could leave this on, but we would still have to take out the fasteners through most of the center section. These, the 4 in the middle go all the way through into the floor of the car, and then the 2 at the ends just go into the battery itself. This one we actually need the center spine because our battery doesn't come with one, so we're going to be reusing this. So let's go ahead and zip all those out. So you see we get a short bolt there that just goes into the battery, and then we get a long bolt here that goes all the way through into the floor. So we're just going to pull all these out. And of course the tricky part comes when we get to the end, because that's going to lose its support. So might actually try and push the table here out of the way. But I'm going to support this when I take the final fastener out. And then we'll just take this thing off and set it to the side for reuse. All right, we're ready to drop this thing down onto the pallet. The only fasteners that are left holding the battery in are the ones on the outside edges. It's worth noting here, because this is a standard range 2170 pack, only about 2/3 of the battery enclosure is full. So the front third of the battery roughly is completely empty. So I've offset my pallet towards the rear of the pack where it's heaviest. That way, when I pick it up with the forklift, we're on the center of gravity and it's not going to want to tip off towards the back side. So something to keep in mind on standard range 2170 packs. Obviously, the lithium iron phosphate pack that we're putting in goes all the way to the front, just like it does on a long range pack. So I'll note that your center of gravity is roughly in the middle of the battery. But on this, it's offset towards the rear. So I'm going to go ahead and bring the car down, and then we'll get this thing unbolted. And I've noticed on this side, there's actually the pieces that are left over from the original rocker trim here. I'm going to have to take those off just so the battery doesn't get hung up. This rocker trim has apparently been ripped off at some point in the past, but the little square pieces where the fasteners go through are still in there, and I don't think they will fully clear the battery, so we don't want this to get hung up on its way out, so I'll zip those out real quick too. Alrighty, there we go. Battery's fully removed. Let's go ahead and roll the table out. We'll swap out our replacement battery into its place, and then we'll do the whole thing all over again in reverse. All right, so here's our new battery. By the way, I gotta say, whoever it was that the seller of this was, which I don't recall off the top of my head, but they did a really fantastic job creating this thing up. They had it strapped down nicely, well supported. Anything that had any high voltage connections on it, they had taped off and covered with plastic. They sealed off all the coolant lines, and the whole thing was all fully crated and boxed in. Anyways, there is one thing that we need to do before we can stick this battery in the car, and that is that our DC input, well, I guess AC input as well, but our charge port connection is different than from this battery and the old one. So this is the newer style bus bar connection. Our old one had that orange plug, so we need to swap out the orange plug type to this pack in order to retrofit it. But here you can see we've got our label for battery type. So we've got E14, 60 kilowatt hour, yada yada. But yeah, built in China with lithium iron phosphate cells. There you can see our part number and such. But yeah, so in order to get this thing swapped out, we've got to open up the whole cover here, the PCS cover, which is easier to do when this is out of the car. But you can actually do it from in the car. It just lives under the back seat, and you have to remove the cross braces and stuff. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get this thing opened up. We've just got a bunch of these EPR Torx Plus, which are actually a 5-sided fastener, which is fun. And then we've got some regular external Torx. We've got one there, one on either side of our data connector. And once we get this opened up, we'll be able to unbolt the flange around that and the bus bars where it connects, which are basically straight down right there, roughly. And we can do the same on the other battery. We'll retrofit the old style connector to this pack. And I cannot get the camera to focus. There we go. Anyway, let's get to it. All right, let's go ahead and swap this out. First, I'm going to unbolt the actual connector from the case here. It's got these sort of shouldered bolts. And we'll set those aside. We've got a little connector down here, which I don't know if you guys can see. Try and reposition you so that you can see it. It's this little yellow guy right here. So we want to pull back on that white tab and then push down on it. And then that connector just unplugs. That's actually our high voltage interlock for this connector. And then we're just going to unbolt these bus bars. This actually shouldn't be live, but just be on the extra safe side. The only stuff in here that should be live would be on the inside of the main contactors. So you can see this right back here. Of course, you probably can't see my glove very well. I'll point with this. So this back here is one of our main contactors. There's one over on the other side. But this orange cap right here is a live connection to the battery. And when the contactor's closed, then this becomes live. And that energizes the high voltage bus. And these right here are the DC charging, the fast charging contactors, so those close when you're DC charging. In any case, we've got this fully disconnected, so we just lift it away, and we'll tilt it back, and it just comes out of there like so. Super simple. Now we'll take our old style connector, and we'll just retrofit it back in there, and it just goes in the opposite way around, and boom, there it is. I am actually going to probably bolt the connector down first, I think. We'll go ahead and get those fasteners in. Just zip those in. Sweet. We'll take our little connector here and we'll plug that in to that assembly. And then the last step is we'll take our two fasteners that go on the bus bars and we'll get those in. Switch this to Tighten. So I'll just run those in by hand to start here. All right, sweet. I'll get all that stuff torqued up. I'll get the lid back on, and then we should be good to install this thing into the car. So now we can go ahead and get started on actually installing the battery in the car. So I've got it roughly lined up into position. I'm going to lower the car down. We'll probably have to fine tune it a little bit, but we'll get it into place where it needs to go. And then once we get everything connected up, of course, we'll see if we can get everything working again. So let's get to it. All right, well, I tried to do a time lapse of the actual install of the battery, but apparently it didn't save. In any case, I've got the battery mounted in the car. We've got our fasteners on the side rails in. I did loosely just get the ones in the front here in by hand just to make sure all the bolt holes lined up. Hopefully everything lines up without any difficulty. It's possible we might have to drop it again and just realign it, but it looks like everything is lined up properly. All of our fasteners here at the back look good. The only question mark would maybe be the ones in the center, but these ones have actually got a lot of play. So if everything here lines up, those are almost certainly going to go in no problem. So now all that's left to do is to start putting everything back together the way that we found it originally, and then we can refill the system with coolant and get the car started up and start the battery pairing process. All right, I've made a fatal flaw. I did not realize that there are different styles of tubes for these Model 3 batteries. Every one that I've encountered either doesn't have tubes attached and I have to transfer them over, or the tubes matched. In this case, the tube does not match. So you can see this tube right here does not line up with this fitting. So I just pulled the old tube off of the other battery to confirm, and you can see that lines up perfectly with where it should go right there. So looks like I'm going to have to drop the pack back down at least partially and swap this lower tube out on this side, because that is not going to work. Either that or it would be try to find this tube right here, but I don't think that that is going to be worth trying to do. For one, where does it go? Oh, it goes into the bottom of the valve assembly here on the bottom of the, what the heck do they call this? Not octo valve, the super manifold. Is that what it is? Anyway, it's one of those two. Anyway, yeah, we've got to swap this thing out and get our other one into position so that it matches. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera, and I'll come back to you guys when I've got that corrected. Okay, back to your regularly scheduled programming. I went ahead and got that tube swapped out. Luckily, I didn't have too much stuff hooked up, so I only had to undo a couple hoses and then just unbolt the battery and drop it down. But we've got that fixed, so we can go ahead and start connecting up all of our coolant hoses where they need to go. So that's one. Got number 2 back here. And another thing that I noticed is some of these hoses do not have their clips. So I am going to have to rob the locking clips off of the old setup, which I actually didn't think about doing there when I was over there just a minute ago. Let's see, that one we can lock and then push it in. This one locks together like so. And I need 2 clips, one on each side here. I'll grab those, lock those in a moment. We can plug these in just like so. Come on. Why can't I get that locking tab in? There we go. Locked in. Okay, I'll grab those clips on here and then I'll go ahead and start on the back. Okay, so at the rear here, we're going to go ahead and hook everything back up the way that it's supposed to go. So this connector actually goes up over the top of this coolant hose. So we want to pull that hose off, which does it have its clip? Yes, it does. So we need to unclip this one just to get it out of our way. There we go. and it's got coolant in it. Okay, let me try and grab something to plug that off with. I think this will probably work. Yep. And that one we'll just have to try and tuck up here and keep it from leaking. We can go ahead and insert this connector, which is nice and dry. We didn't get any coolant in it. Flip the lever up, lock it in, and then we can go ahead and put our hose back where it belongs. Sweet. Nice thing about these is if you put the clip in the locked position and then push it on there, you get a real positive click when it goes into position. And I just realized we may have messed up because we should have probably put that cable on first. But let me see if I can get it in there. Maybe it'll work. So here's our cable assembly. I'm going to go ahead and feed this end through where it goes up to the motor. Okay. Come on. There we go. Okay. That wasn't so bad. And then the one up here will get pushed into position. Boom. All right. So we've got that all into position. We got a couple more coolant lines we need to connect. So we have this one that we removed from the motor, which goes that way. So we'll fish this through. The other end of it connects to that hose there, which, oh, I was able to get that. Okay, that one's snapped in. That one's snapped in. Do we have any other coolant hoses to connect? Just this one, which this one comes from the other side of the motor and connects over here on this side tube. Some of these do have a little index mark where they have to go a certain direction, and other ones you don't have to line it up perfectly. Okay, I think we're solid. I'm going to go ahead and raise this up just a little bit. There we go. That way I'm not quite so stooped over under here. And we can start, well, I was going to say we could start attaching our skid plates and stuff, but right now we have everything connected. So what we should probably do at this juncture is try and do a vacuum purge on the cooling system, try and suck as much coolant into the system as we can, and then we'll try and start it, make sure we can get it to start up, and while it's doing all of its pairing processes, we can go ahead and reassemble all this stuff. All right, so our only electrical connections we have left to make are just for our DC to DC converter on the PCS here. So we've got that, and then we've got our little bus bar, just like so. Got those. Okay, let me grab some tools just to tighten that down with. Okay. All right, sweet. Then we've got our low voltage connection for BMS and everything. And then we've got our charge port connection over there. Go ahead and stick this thing on. Boom. All right, so we're all electrically connected at this point. I'm going to wait to connect the 12-volt battery until after we get some coolant purged through the system, just to make sure, well, technically it's in coolant fill mode right now, so the pumps shouldn't run. But we don't really want to start the car up and try and have it power the DC to DC and stuff with no coolant. So we'll try and purge the coolant through the system, and then we'll go ahead and boot the car up. All right, we're ready to try and do a vacuum fill on our cooling system. So I've got an adapter here. It just screws right onto the coolant reservoir. Spin that down until it's sealed. We've got our fitting that attaches to that, just like so. And then this is our vacuum manifold. And I've got our container of coolant down here in the bottom. And we've just got a little pickup with a filter on it. We're just reusing the original coolant, but we've got a filter just to make sure we don't pick up any dirt. This is the outlet side of the tube, and it kind of always sprays a little bit of coolant out. So I always just take a container and stick it on here when we draw a vacuum, just so that we don't spray aerosolized coolant all over the place. So we're gonna go ahead and open this valve. That's gonna draw a vacuum on the system. When our needle on the gauge gets to about negative 0.6 bar, we're going to go ahead and shut off the vacuum. And then we're going to open the valve to the coolant reservoir, and it will suck coolant from our container right into the cooling system. So I just got to make sure to hold this tube at the bottom so it actually draws coolant. And look at that, you can see it's drawing the coolant into the system as the vacuum is decreasing. We'll have to do this a couple times over a few cycles, but we'll try and suck as much coolant into the system as we can. We probably won't be able to put 100% of the coolant back in that we got out, but we should be able to at least get most of it. And then afterwards we can run just a regular coolant air purge routine. But yeah, just as simple as that, not too difficult. But this is pretty important for getting the cooling system filled properly without having to wait forever and do multiple coolant air purge cycles. So yeah, just let this thing draw down its vacuum and suck up all the coolant, then we'll be good to go. All right, I think we've sucked in about as much coolant as we possibly can. So let's go ahead and boot up the car, and then we can go ahead and get started on our pairing routines. Just heard the contactors close, that's a good sign. And let's go ahead and hop in. We still haven't bolted in everything in the interior, and this is all still taken apart. I'm just going to push the carpet down here, kind of out of my way just enough that I can sit. And we'll wait for the car to boot up here. Let's see if it'll boot up. It might not boot up automatically because all the doors were already open. I'll close this door and then open it. We'll see if we get signs of life. There we go. So it should just take a minute to boot up. And then since we're already in service mode plus, we should be able to do all the procedures that we want to do right here on the screen without having to go actually plug a computer in with Toolbox. It's kind of the nice thing about the newer cars like this is once you're in service mode plus, which does require Toolbox access to be able to enable, but once it's in service mode plus on the newer cars like Model 3 and stuff, you can do just about everything from the screen. So let's go to high voltage, battery, and look at that. We've got firmware mismatch, run firmware redeploy, blah, blah, blah. We want to go to HV battery replacement. So first we want to do a software reinstall. Actually, we'll need to connect to my internet here. All right, we're officially connected to Wi-Fi. So now we can do our software reinstall. And this will take 5 or 10 minutes. So yeah, it's going to go ahead and do a software update. Once it's finished, I'll bring you guys back in and we'll do the next step, which is the high voltage battery replacement routine. And then I believe we're going to need to configure some other settings since this is an LFP pack. There's a few other changes that we need to make. So we'll do that once it's finished updating. I guess I should also note I've got my power supply connected to this thing so that while it's doing its software update, we don't run a risk of the 12-volt battery dying in the middle. So it should be good there. I think I'm probably going to, I'll just wait it out until it's finished doing its update, and then we can start on the next steps of the procedure. All right, our software update completed. It's time to run our battery replacement routine. Oh, and of course we got to unlock the gateway. So we'll go ahead and do that. Bingo. Shut our blinker off. And now we can run that routine. Okay, it'll go through its routine here. It'll probably take, I don't know, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. Doesn't take too terribly long, but I'll go ahead and get back to you guys when it's finished with its procedure here. All right, that finished its procedure. Now, this is my first time doing an LFP swap on one of these. I'm pretty sure we have to go to HV battery configs. Okay, we are standard range, so that we want to keep the same, but we want to do our pack performance deviation from standard pack mass. So we want to do, I believe it's going to be CATL E1 pack mass increase, because this is the CATL lithium iron phosphate pack. E3 depot pack weight between E1. Yeah, so we're going to do mass deviation 1. We'll hit check. Infotainment system may reboot. Set gateway configuration with a safe gateway refresh. Okay. That was easy. And let's see, do we go into drive? That we do. Of course, it's unhappy with the door open and everything, but it looks like we're all finished. We do have a couple of faults, it looked like, for the release notes. Don't care. Looks like we have some faults for our PTC heater. Cabin PTC has a problem. Occupancy sensors are just because the back seat is out. VC front MIA. Inverter is weird. Don't know what's up with that. That doesn't actually seem to be a problem because it appears that we are functional. Let me close the door and just see what it does. Oh, it keeps wanting to put it into. Okay, we'll try and fasten our seatbelt because the car is unhappy. Ignore and continue to drive. Okay, I can hear the wheels spinning. Don't know if you guys could see that, but it looked like we're good there, so we'll go into park. And I think we're good. We just have to continue doing our coolant air purge and put the car back together. We've got to put the rest of our fasteners in, reassemble our interior. There's a few bits and pieces we need to put together on the bottom side, of course. Let's go back to service mode. And we want to run our actions, coolant air purge, start. And then we'll go ahead and add coolant. It looks like it's already sucking it down, so I'll go ahead and get on that. All right, we're back under the car. Time to start reassembling everything else under here. So I do have one little stud right here that just attaches that cable harness. I think I've got another fastener that goes further up on the motor here, which isn't as mission critical right at this moment. I'll just get it started for now. Okay, that one's in. Now the next step is that I want to get this kind of skid plate protector in the rear here. Now there are a couple different coolant hoses and stuff that clip to it. So we want to get the routing correct. Like this guy right here runs from the inside to the outside. That one runs on the outside. And then we've got one stud right here that kind of keeps it aligned. Of course, if I could get the nut on there without dropping it. There we go, and that'll just keep that in there. We've got this little clip here, which is supposed to attach to this thing. I don't think it was before. Then we've got some more clips to attach the coolant hoses to this thing. So we've got one right here. That is not quite positioned where it should be. Okay, let's go ahead and just get this tightened up. Okay, I think we're good. And then these coolant hoses over here attach, and I think we're good there. Got a couple of little fasteners that go in here on the bottom. Sweet. And we've got a few fasteners that go in up here on the top side. Okay, and we also have our shear plates to reassemble on there. Just like I did when we took these off, we'll do them one at a time. So we'll undo one subframe bolt. We'll get our shear plate on. That's the wrong one. There we go. Make sure our coolant hoses go in there. Got a couple fasteners. Okay, and we can put our main subframe bolt in, and that's good. And I'll just repeat the same thing on the other side, then we'll move on to the front. All right, I got everything done on the bottom side. Everything's all buttoned up, apart from just the rocker trim on this side. Of course, the other one was already ripped off to start with, so we don't have one there. Just have to button up the interior, get the rear seat cushion in, and I did get the front mostly put together. We just have the interior trim on that side to put together, and then we should be good to take this thing for a test drive. Alrighty, we're all buttoned up, interior's all back together, all of our trim is in place. Let's go ahead and exit service mode here, and it looks like we got no alerts other than for our cabin heat issue. I think we're ready for a test drive here, so I'm going to go ahead and back out of the shop and we'll take this thing for a spin. Alright, we're pulling out onto the road here. Let's go ahead and go this way. I think that'll be best as far as traffic at this time of day. And everything feels good. No issues. We did end up with pretty high state of charge on this for shipping, which not a huge fan of that, but that's all right. It probably means that our BMS is pretty well calibrated on it at least. And yeah, we'll take it out on the main road here, get it up to speed. and we'll see how it is. All right, we've got a green. Let's see how she goes. Sweet. Acceleration seems fine. That was only just a little bit of throttle. Oh, we have a power reduced message. Okay, that's not great. Well, we'll have to investigate that and see what's going on. Maybe we've got another calibration routine we need to do or something. In any case, we'll go ahead and make our way back to the shop here, see what's up. All right, we're back at the shop. Let's go ahead and go into service mode and see what our power reduced message is about. I could definitely tell that power was significantly reduced when we were driving it. It might just be that it has an air pocket stuck in the cooling system. It might not have purged all the air out. So we'll go into service mode here, enter. Yeah, and I can hear the fans running, so that kind of makes sense. Let's go service alerts. Okay, low flow, coolant valve calibration, HVAC system ECU thermal issue. Okay, so we have, oh yeah, and the autopilot board was getting pretty warm. Okay, so we must have a cooling system issue for sure. Well, not a cooling system issue, but I think we've probably got a significant amount of air in the system. So let's go back to service here. We'll go thermal, thermal, actions, actually, coolant system. Does that do anything different? Yeah, a little bit. Shows us that this pump right here is running. This pump is apparently not running. Don't know if it does or doesn't. It's not faulted, so. Oh yeah, there we go. Our rear drive inverter got hot, so that's why our performance was limited. So let's go ahead and run coolant air purge. We'll need to unlock the gateway. And gateway unlocked. Okay, we'll hit run. Let the coolant air purge run again and see if we can work all of our air out of the system. It might have been that just taking it around that short drive may have jostled enough air loose that it might be able to actually properly purge it this time. I was a little bit worried that we didn't get all the coolant in the system, so hopefully this works. All right, well, I'm gonna have to close things off here for today and come back to this thing tomorrow, but it looks like we just need to purge some air out of the cooling system. But other than that, it looks like just about everything's good. So we'll come back to this tomorrow and we'll get this thing all finished up. Alrighty folks, well, it took me way longer to figure this out than it should have. But essentially what happened is when this battery originally showed up, it had some little just pieces of microfiber towel shoved in some of the coolant lines for the battery just to keep it from leaking during shipping. And when I unpacked everything, apparently I missed one. And it was the one on the outlet side from the battery, which is this tube right here. Well, it connects to this tube, ends up at the manifold here. What ended up happening is this rag got sucked up from the battery back here, made it all the way up this tube into the bottom of our manifold here. It actually got sucked all the way through this valve, which would have been positioned about like so. And it ended up wedged in this section where this isn't actually a pump, this is just a dummy. Because this is a rear-wheel drive car. Dual motor cars would have another pump right here. But essentially this got sucked into there, and it got jammed up inside. And it took forever to find that. But finally found it, ready to get this thing back together. I'm just going to go ahead and put it all together, get the cooling system purged, make sure we're all good, and then finally this car will be ready to go. But yeah, I should have paid a little closer attention when I got the battery unpacked and made sure all the cooling lines were not blocked, and clearly I paid the price here. Alrighty folks, I got the coolant Repurged, everything's put back together. I've test driven the car once again, and everything is sorted. So that's going to be it for this one. Pretty straightforward battery swap for this Model 3. Pretty nice for it to go from the original NMC 2170s to the LFP. You'll be able to charge it to full every day and not have to worry about it, and have a bit more usable range. So anyway, that's going to be it for this one. If you've got any questions, leave them down in the comments section. And as always, thanks for watching.